These are the secrets hidden inside of Minecraft that you maybe missed. The Heavy Core is not only an interesting item for us being able to use it to craft the mace, but it's also interesting because what is it? I mean, besides heavy. And while there's not a lot of lore yet to go off of for this thing, this hidden detail down in the ancient cities suggests more. Because as the user Penguin Orgalorg shows off on Reddit, since the Heavy Core is placeable, we're able to set it down inside of the ancient city portal frame and notice that it fits perfectly within the texture for a reinforced deep slate. Coincidence? I think so. Minecraft Wolf Armor is a great item, but there's a hidden flaw to its texture. And that is, as users have pointed out, if you go and study the way that a dog's kneecaps actually work, you would notice that the front knee pads of the Wolf Armor should actually be placed on the other way around. As is currently, they're backwards. But maybe if we consider what the comments are saying, and after all, it's leg armor, not for the joints. And given that it can withstand all 500 HP that we're dealing with this mace, it's clearly effective armor at that too. Don't just use the new crafter block for crafting. I know that seems confusing, but actually what you're going to want to try to use it for is a password system like this. Since as we can see from this example, every time that we input which slot not to put an item inside of the crafter, that gives off a redstone output that we're able to track. Though with the way that we're able to track the redstone signal that's coming out of this block with a comparator, what's actually happening is that you can press any 4 buttons inside of this and it'll still work. Which doesn't give us necessarily a password system, but it does give us a cool way to enter your base. And for me, that looks a lot better than a lever. I'm willing to work with it. Wind charges are more powerful than you think, since during the preview phases for the Bedrock Edition versions of 1.21, some players discovered that it's possible to actually curve the way that the wind charge goes after you throw it. What you would do is throw out the wind charge and then start immediately punching in the direction that you want it to go. And in a case like this, that's enough to get it underneath this wall and hook up right to press the button on the other side. Which, as you can imagine, could be monumental if you wanted to use this for something like a new map in your world. I mean, this is just begging for minigames. But before you go try it on Java, unfortunately this only works in Bedrock because of the way the projectiles work in that code. Which is unfortunate, but don't say I didn't warn you. This is one of the strangest things that Mojang's ever said about a mob. Since when referring to a change that they made in the Bedrock Edition previews for 121, they mentioned how there was a change to make it so that breezes wouldn't drown while they were swimming. And the reason for that being that breezes breathe through their eyes rather than their feet. And while that's supposed to be referring to the fact that the eye height on a hitbox for the mobs actually refers to where they breathe from, it's still so weird to think of it like this. Especially when I thought that the breeze was a mob made out of pure air anyway. Why does it need to breathe? I thought it was always breathing. I don't know. This might be one of the fastest ways to reach build height in Minecraft 121. Since while in the past we could only use the cake ladder with horses because they're able to step up full blocks like this, with the new step height attribute command that we can type out, we're now able to step up 10 blocks in a breeze. Not that breeze. And as you can see from this user's example, in just 1 second they go from the bottom of the stack right up to the top. So continuing this pattern onward, you could get yourself up to build height, including the new extended build height, faster than some of the methods that we've tested in the past in this video. There you have it, easy as cake. Or cakes. Here's how to use one oozing potion to disable all mob spawning around you. The way we do this is going to seem pretty strange and maybe a little barbaric, but by first applying the oozing potion to 4 snow golems in a pen like this, then when we kill them, we're going to be able to get even more slime spawning from them. Split them down into their smaller slime counterparts, and then we'll quickly get up to the 16 cave mobs that'll disable all cave mobs spawning locally around you. Since on Bedrock Edition, the amount of cave mobs that are able to be spawned locally is much lower than what we're used to on Java. You can even then use name tags to make sure they don't despawn. That doesn't remove them from the mob cap, and you'll no longer have any cave mob spawning around your base. Pretty good for just a single potion and a couple of snowballs. After you see this dirt simple redstone build hack, you'll never want to touch redstone lamps again. Since with the new copper bulbs, it's just as easy to make a light pattern that alternates, and that way you'll have something noticeable to guide you home when you get lost at night. Simply place a copper bulb on this side, powered on with a lever, and then place an unlit one on the other side, and by using a simple clock, whether that's a hopper clock or an observer clock where both observers are facing each other, and all of a sudden we've made our redstone sign without using any other redstone. And if you wanted to stay on for longer, you can even customize the delay in the hoppers by just adding in more items to the clock. This Elytra hack just got a huge boost in newer updates, since now in Java Edition, we're able to put leads on boats the same way we could on Bedrock Edition. So if you put more mobs inside of those boats, you could essentially bring 2 mobs at a time if you're on an Elytra. And even more if you use llamas inside of those and put your friends on the back of those llamas and then parrots riding your friends. At a certain point, you gotta make sure that they start thanking the bus driver you're giving so many rides. And if not, you can just let them crash to the ground and fall harder than Fortnite. Minecraft's nether portals will never be the same again, since now it's possible to use an ender pearl to teleport yourself through a nether portal by right-clicking it, which could give you one of the fastest ways to escape if you need to get out of the nether on a pinch. Or if you're looking for something more permanent than that chase scene, then you could always try something like this example. With the ability to now ride minecarts through nether portals, we're able to make it so that you can board your nether travel system in the overworld and end up on the other side on another overworld track. Which, even though it isn't as fast as riding an iceboat highway through the nether, it literally requires no input from us. Just get into the minecart and that's it. You can be hands-off eating chips if you want. And to me, that sounds like a much more enjoyable ride. I mean, as long as you pick good chips. This difference between Bedrock Edition and Java is kinda creepy. And while you might not notice it at first, if you look at both of the screens side by side like this example from X1 Craft, you'll see that Bedrock Edition actually has first-person idle animations where we can see the character breathing while holding their item. Whereas in Java, we just hold it static like this. And while I can't say that I like to think about the character breathing in this way, it is also nice to see in this example that Bedrock doesn't have the item stitching issue on the side of the item like we do here on Java. Their swords fully connect. Ours never have. Minecraft 1.21 added in automatic crafting and now automatic mining. Since now what'll happen is that any time that an entity of any type comes through the end portal, it'll break the blocks and drop them as items on top of that obsidian platform. And folks, it's pretty ridiculous how well this works. I mean, you could even place down deep slate diamond ore and it'll break it as if it was broken using a pickaxe. And at this point, if we can automate both the mining and the crafting, who even needs us anymore? Tell me if this has happened to you. You're out exploring, you're ways away from your base, and while you're taming the new dog variants that we're able to find, you've now got more than a few dogs to bring home with you. The only issue is, you're only able to fit one of them inside of your boat. So how do we get them over this large body of water? They're not going to be able to teleport to us if we unload them. Well, thankfully, now it's possible to leash multiple boats behind you while you steer your own. So just place your multiple dogs inside of the boats behind you, and that way you will no longer lose those dogs while you're traveling. It's kind of like an inverse dog sled. I love it. This has to be the new fastest way to travel inside of Minecraft. Since now, if we throw an ender pearl inside of the portal, it'll still be a projectile when it reaches the other side, meaning we're still able to teleport with it when we launch it into another nether portal over there. Aligned just right in this example, Acid Omega Pro was able to use it to teleport up to this top level portal in no more than the blink of an eye. You don't even go into the nether to notice this. Before you realize it, you're already back at the overworld at your destination. Just make sure you have feather falling boots so you're not taking all the damage from all that teleporting. Here's how to turn your Minecraft boat into a warship. Since by dragging behind a couple of snow golems that you put onto a raft, then when we attach that to a lead and hold that while we're in our boat, we can drag that along and have them do drive-bys to attack any mobs that get close to you. And for attacking some of the drowned before they throw a trident at your boat, that seems particularly helpful. If anything, those few frames where they get damaged by a snowball could be just the amount of time you need to escape before their trident hits you. Here's how to do Green's boat prank, but so much worse. Since now with the new crafter block, we're able to face that into our dispenser and have it in such a way where it's automatically crafting the boats for even more storage. Think about it, boats aren't a stackable item. So in the past we had way less storage going into our dispenser, but oak planks are stackable. So placing those inside of chests, we're able to have 1,382 potential boats stacked up in just this small system using 4 chests. So if you could believe it, this could get pretty ridiculous in how many boats it places into this one water block square. And as the original user is quick to point out, when you break this, you're very likely to also kill the server that you're standing on. So only do this if you really want to be mean or if you have some way to clear all the boats afterwards. Did you notice this mistake inside of the Minecraft panorama for 1.21? I wouldn't blame you if you didn't. But as Phoenix SC was quick to point out, if you zoom in on this part of the panorama and look underneath the ladders on the left side, you'll notice that it's actually missing a ladder on this side where it should have been equal and symmetrical to the one on the right. And if you really want to take a peek for yourself, then you can slow it down by going to the accessibility tab in options and changing the panorama speed. Slow it down just enough and oh, there you go, a bug. And speaking of bugs added in 1.21, perhaps my favorite happened in the pre-release where you would leash a boat onto a fence. Since if you had both the fence and the boat midair and tied a leash between the two of them, you'll notice that the boat would keep bouncing up and down with infinite upward momentum. But it's unfortunate this was patched because it would have been one of the funniest ways to make an AFK machine in Minecraft. I mean, imagine instead of tying your dog to a fence, you could just tie it inside of a boat like this, and that would be enough to keep it entertained while you're going away. Every time time that an item goes through the end portal or the end portal gateways inside of the end, it'll now load the chunks on the other side. What's so important about that is that we now have an automatic way to keep our farms going inside of the end. In the overworld, we use this to keep our farms running even if they're not at spawn. And now we're able to do the same inside of the other dimension. And with how much open space there is in the end, if you really wanted to, you could build some pretty cool farms here as well. I would just make sure that no Endermen come by and steal any blocks from it. In the new Minecraft update, pickaxes are now food. Or really, any item is. Because of the way that they've changed data packs recently, it's now possible to make it so that any block or item can behave like anything. So you could literally turn a block of dirt into the best pickaxe in the game and have it auto mine diamond ore. Or you can make the dragon egg something you can eat like a sunny side up. Or you could turn every item that you want into some kind of music disc and put it inside of the jukebox. I personally like turning the clock into the wait music disc because, come on. And any feature that lets me put another dad joke inside of Minecraft is fine by me. Why are we able to do this inside of spectator mode? Since during the development phases for 1.21, we could see that if you leash the boats and then go into spectator mode, we would still be attached to all of those leads while we're here. And as you can see, this does not happen with any other mobs in the game. If we were to leash a pig and then go into spectator mode, that wouldn't happen. And rightfully so, might I add. But boats, for some reason, we're allowed to take those hostage. You can even drag it around while you're in spectator mode, and considering that you can scroll up on spectator mode to go at blazingly fast speeds, the results here get ridiculous quick. When you look at the texture for a 3D model, it usually looks pretty weird. And part of the reason for that is how they have to space out different parts of the texture to correspond with different parts of the 3D model. But not every part of the texture is going to be visible on the model. And so, in those invisible areas, even if you have pixels, they're not going to show up. So I wouldn't blame you if you've never noticed the secret Jeb text that's hidden on the Guardian, because in-game, it's not visible. But look at the texture, and sure enough, right before the texture update of 1.14, you can see that Jeb signed both the textures for the normal Guardian and the Elder Guardian in the bottom right. What's even weirder though is that it's not including the underscore that Jeb typically stylizes with, which is really confusing because I don't think that little bit of extra pixels would have made it visible. But regardless, it's not even in the game anymore, since after Jappa took over as the head artist for Minecraft, the textures were redone and this was dropped. The crafting menu is one of the most useful features added to Minecraft in recent years. But it turns out it's not just useful for crafting, since if you were to type in the phrase Excited Z into the crafting table search bar, then it changes your text in the game to the Pirate Speak language option. So if for some reason you're trying to speedrun this and you don't want to go all the way over to your languages options in the settings, you could just do this. But I don't think there's a way to turn it off through the same method, so I hope you be liking Pirate Speak, you scallywag. This shield doesn't have a banner on it, or does it? I felt like Vsauce at that one. Hey, Vsauce, this shield doesn't have a banner on it, or does it? I digress. Anyway, because if you look at the textures for the shield, you can see that there's actually a banner texture that's hidden inside of the shield that isn't visible when we hold the model. And it turns out this is just the base pattern so that it knows where to call from for the pattern. And it's probably best that it's hidden. It's not exactly a looker. But I mean, when you have the ability to make the skip logo for your shield, why would you ever choose anything else? At least it's better than the ominous banner shield. Back when the silverfish was added in beta 1.8, it looked pretty similar to the silverfish we're familiar with today. However, there was a texture that dated back to beta 1.7 before the mod was added. And this texture file looks a lot different from what we're familiar with. Since here, there were invisible pixels that didn't show on the model, but they did suggest that the silverfish originally was supposed to have hair on it. And I think it's safe to say that's just gross. I've never wanted to imagine what these things feel like anyway, but if they had a fur texture to them, it's definitely not something I want to get infested with in the new update. I guess actually there's not a lot of things that I want to get infested with, but adding extra hair follicles to it, I'm not going to get any happier. A minecart by itself doesn't move on a rail. I mean, that's really why we're supposed to have furnace minecarts to move them, but the truth is that if you have 10 extra ingots of iron, you're able to make this a lot easier. Since by putting 3 minecarts into the same spot, you'll then find that they're able to move on their own without any rails. And it gets even weirder from there. Like, they'll typically start to move diagonally like this, and then if you have these 1-block gaps that are in the floor, they'll just roll over it with no problem. Which, I'll be honest, I can't say I'm a little jealous. It's embarrassing when 3 minecarts are better at parkour than me. Back in the early days of Minecraft, boats would break against almost everything, and it made them a real pain to navigate with. I mean, try to go through a swamp in the old updates, and it was just about impossible. And while our boats are a lot more resilient nowadays, it does seem to be that there are still restrictions under which they'll break. And what's weird is that if you drop a boat from most heights, it won't take any damage, but dropping specifically from heights of 12 blocks, 13 blocks, 49, 51, 111, 114, 198, 202, and 310 blocks, then at all of those points, the boat will just shatter into its old pieces. But I don't even know if we can get mad at Mojang for that. I mean, they didn't promise these things as planes, they're boats. Keep them to the water, they're not gonna have to fall fall any distance, let alone 310 blocks. By this point, you probably know that fishing rods can pull a lot more than just fish. I mean, it's a pretty fun pastime to be able to hook your friends and then just pull them around with one of these. But it's not just mobs that we're able to attach to our fishing rod, since there are also entities that we can do this to as well. And that includes weird blocks like Prime TNT, anvils, and even the sparks that come out of the shulkers. And perhaps my favorite that we're able to do from this is to hook different blocks while they're falling entities. And so if you drop off the dragon egg from a high enough height, you can challenge your friends to have to grab it onto their side and play the weirdest game of Hungry Hungry Hippos yet. If you were to look closely at the Blaze's texture, you're gonna see something that we can't see in regular gameplay. Now, it might be hard to tell because, honestly, it doesn't even look like much in this texture, but the way that it's drawn, the Blaze has a hidden body part to its texture. That's just never seen in regular gameplay, because instead, we get the Blaze floating around as a head with a bunch of its arms around it. And really, this seems more akin to something that the Wildfire was supposed to have, rather than the Blaze. But I guess technically neither of them have it, because even if it's on the texture, it's not shown in gameplay. Probably more of a placeholder than anything. If you were to take a max-size slime and then give it a name tag, then when you kill it, you'll notice that that name tag will be passed down into all 4 of its copies. And that'll continue to happen as you cut it down into smaller and smaller slimes, which I think is a funny feature, and I'd personally like it better if it included Junior or some variation of that to each of the slimes' names. But I guess it kind of brings up a Shiba Theseus dilemma, right? Like, which one of these slimes is the original slime? I guess in some way all of them equally are, but does that make one of them more deserving of the name than the other? I guess that's why Mojang's pretty generous with how they give it out. I wouldn't be able to figure it out. When the panda was first revealed for Minecraft, there wasn't a lot of talk that came to this secret feature that it was added in with. And while there are definitely players that know about the rare brown panda variant, not nearly as many know about other variants of the panda, such as the lazy, the worried, the playful, the aggressive, and the weak versions of the panda. They'll each have different face textures, and they'll all behave pretty differently. Like, if you ever wonder why pandas are marked as a neutral mob, you've got the aggressive pandas to thank for that. Hit one of these and they'll continue to go after the player, or any entity that goes after them. Whereas the slowest pandas happen to be the lazy pandas, and you're usually able to tell which ones those are because they're smiling. And if you want a slime ball farm, go for the weak pandas. They got a snotty nose, and when they're baby versions, they tend to sneeze more. Now, it's always seemed like a waste to me that we have to craft a jukebox using a diamond, but it turns out there's actually a real-world inspiration for this, since the reason that we use diamonds is that this was inspired by the Edison phonograph, which originally used diamond needles to play the music better from records. And I mean, I guess that's fair, but considering there's also cheaper ways to be able to play the music, I don't know if we had to go for one of the most expensive. And so I still might have to argue that this is just a waste, even if it's inspired by a real-world waste. If you were to look closely at the orange hearts that happen when you ride a mob, you notice that they're not mob faces or anything, but instead, they're supposed to represent saddles. And to be honest, even when I know that that's what I'm looking for, I do still have to kind of squint and turn my head to see it. There's not a lot of pixels to play around with. So even if this wasn't intentionally kept secret, it was unintentionally so just because of how low fidelity the texture was. What would you call this item? Now, if you guessed pottery shards, you're both technically correct and technically incorrect, since when these were first added into the game, Mojang originally called them pottery shards. But when the community pointed out that this is actually not the technical term, they instead changed this to pottery shards. And so both names have technically been a name for this item, so I doubt anyone's gonna get too mad at you when you pronounce it wrong, especially when the official one looks like it's a typo, if anything. I think as long as you preface it with pottery, people are gonna get what you mean. This here is a balloon, but what might shock you is just how powerful this thing is. And while we'll get into how you get the ingredients to craft one of these, there is a lot of possibility here, both as a decoration and a bit of a school prank. Because even though we can tie this entity to a wall or a fence to keep it grounded, it's when we tie it to a mob that it really starts to get silly. See, in the Education Edition, you can get these guys to lift right off the ground. But unfortunately, you can't attach these to monsters, so there goes the killing method. But if it means anything, you can still pick up an iron golem, so that's kind of funny in its own right. And if you have yourself a bow and arrow or a trident, you can even shoot down the balloons to pop them. Nobody likes waiting. Whether it's waiting in line, waiting for files to download, or a video to buffer, nobody likes their time wasted, which largely makes nether portals a pain to deal with. In survival mode, not only do you have to wait for the whole sickness animation to play out, but then you've also got to let an entire other dimension load on the other side. It's not exactly speedy, to say the least. But if you got some items, we might be able to cut that down. You see, by using nether portal chunk loading, all it takes is throwing an item to the other side, and then all of a sudden, it'll do all of the loading for you. So going forward, maybe take the time to hit the Q key. Might just save you some down the road. If you were to type this seed into Minecraft Snapshot 21W11A, then on the surface, everything would look fine, but it was underground where things got a little wonky. Since down here, the bone blocks that were supposed to generate in this fossil generated a little too much, and unfortunately that meant that it overrode with the bedrock blocks of the floor, meaning that if you broke a few ribs, you could actually get yourself down to the void in survival. But outside of the novelty, there's really no point to going down to the void, so it's for the best that this got patched out. It's possible to get all of the illegal items that you'd only ever see in creative admin commands entirely in your survival world. The way we do this is actually through an April Fool's update. Since back in the one block at a time snapshot that Mojang did for April Fools, the Enderman could spawn only illegal items. And while most of us would have just tried out that snapshot in a world that wasn't important, you are able to update that world like any other snapshot, meaning that you can then have this Enderman that's holding a structure block. Kill it, get it to drop its item, and now you've got something that you shouldn't even be able to have in the base game. And honestly, it's probably something that most players who are visiting your world wouldn't even recognize. That's how rare it is. But it also means you need to play this terrible snapshot, so I guess you did have to work for it in the end. If you're playing on peaceful mode, keep this one in mind, since the truth is that you're going overkill if you're putting Respiration 3 on your helmet, since in this difficulty, putting any level of respiration on your helmet will mean that you cannot drown. And the reason for this is that the peaceful mode regeneration rate is enough to actually keep up with the drowning damage that you take when you have respiration. So don't waste your levels trying to go overkill on this. Finding buried treasure in Minecraft is easier said than done. Now sure, it's easy to find the buried treasure maps themselves since they stick out in big sunken ships, but actually finding the place where X marks the spot, it's not as simple. And while there are plenty of little tips to help you pinpoint it, if you're on Bedrock, the solution is as simple as a Riptide Trident. By launching yourself into nearby walls in the sand bed, you can glitch through the blocks and find the chest just like that. Is it the most practical method? I'm not entirely sure, but when it's this ridiculous, I'll gladly take another excuse to use my trident. When you're on multiplayer, it's nice to offer some starting gear to the new players, but how do you guarantee that that stuff only goes to those who need it, instead of the rich players who are looking for free handouts? Well, odd as it may seem, this book could do the trick. As RaiseWorks demonstrates, having a book written like so can overload the data and cause a player with too many items in their inventory to get kicked out when they open up the chest. But if you have nothing, it works as planned. And though I barely understand the science behind it, it is a cool system. Back in Minecraft Alpha, Ethos Lab figured out that if you placed a cactus in a 4x4 area, and then water next to each cactus, then when you placed down a boat, it would break and duplicate the wood, making this one of the earliest duplication glitches ever found in Minecraft. Most of us know by now that axes can pack a lot more damage than a sword, but what they have in attack power, they don't exactly make up for in attack speed. Sure, if you get hit off successfully, it's great, but if you need another shot, you're out of luck. Though while you and I might struggle with these weapons, we could always hire some help for the job. Unlike us, Vindicators don't have the same restrictions, meaning that on hard mode, these guys can do a whopping 19 points of damage. Folks, that's 9.5 hearts. Clearly, if you're looking for some extra muscle, these might just do the trick and then some. But just make sure Johnny doesn't put you in his line of sight, alright? TNT duplication machines are great, but getting slime blocks and coral early on is a real tough business. So instead, we can take after this user's design and make an easy early game cobble farm. Since by supplementing our build with a lot more observers, we're able to glitch out the TNT just the same and essentially duplicate it for all our uses. And then with enough cobblestone generators packed into the inside of the blast chamber, this is a fully automatic way to get loads of cobblestone, which will be handy because as soon as you do get a Silk Touch pick, you're really not going to get a lot more cobblestone from that point, so better to stock up while you can. Beacons basically define the later stages of the game in Minecraft, but what these are good for in haste, jump boost, and speed, apparently they lack in regeneration. Now that's not to say that they don't give regen, clearly they do, but a glitch in the code prevents these beacons from giving the full regen after activated. So to change that, we can fix this glitch with another exploit, and use this system to deactivate and reactivate the beacon for a faster regen, going from a full regen of 72 seconds with the normal one to roughly 51 seconds with our modified. So if you're looking to save some seconds next time you're in danger, then this workaround's what you need. I don't think any of us want to get on a bee's bad side. For one, they're just so adorable that you probably don't want to hurt one anyway, but that's not to mention that they can also carry quite a stinger. So, to change their offensive capabilities to defensive, how about we make ourselves a bee army? With this swarm, all it takes is an enemy to be hit by one mistake, and the damage will be done. And folks, if you can believe it, these things can even take down the Wither. Now sure, you'll need a lot of them, and it would probably help to splash them with a Strength 2 potion, but the point still stands that this buzzing battalion can wreck through anything you throw at them. and maybe next time they'll want to stay on your good side. I think we all can agree the channeling enchantment's pretty great. For one, not only is it fun to summon lightning like your last name is Odinson, but that very lightning allows you to change and manipulate different mobs. So when you're fed up of typical mushrooms and you're looking for a change, well, bam. It's great, but obviously all that lightning can get pretty dangerous. So if you're trying to do your magic without all the pain of electrocution, maybe try this. You see, by placing down an item frame, all you have to do is zap that and the job gets done the same way. Except this time, no one's getting hurt in the process. Which is nice, because really, there's no point in converting a corpse. But you might be wondering how you even explore ancient cities without having to worry about you-know-who. Well, Illumango's got you covered. Since with this machine, if we just shoot 6 arrows onto the wool block at the bottom of the arrow chamber, then we can close it back up and flip this on and off switch on the hopper clock, which all comes together to mean that we're completely disabling warden spawning. So even though you might hear warden sounds coming from this machine, the actual truth is those are the sounds of failed warden spawn attempts, since when you look around, you're not going to see any. And not only will this work in the ancient city that you built it within, but because of the built-in chunk loading, we guarantee that this works in any ancient city that you step into in the world, just as long as you're the player that shot the arrows into the machine. And at that point, we can use our hoe to get rid of all the skulk shriekers, so that even when this machine isn't working, we're still not going to have to worry about the warden. As you can see, I'm not in this boat, but even though that's easy to see, that's also not true, at least according to the server. See, when you stand on top of a boat like this and then right-click it really fast, then it's possible to desync from the actual server and have it think that you're still inside of the boat while we're still able to walk around on our client. Why would you do this? Well, the interesting thing is that everything that we do while we're outside of the boat on our end is still going to be processed even though we're inside of the boat on the server. So anything that we do while we're technically outside of the boat is eventually going to update to the server, which means we build up a tall tower, jump off of it, take no fall damage, and then when we need to, hit shift and teleport right back to the boat like we were supposed to be. Which is definitely weird, but it's also a really cool magic trick. So impress your friends if you can with this one. If you're mining blocks like this, you gotta stop. Since the truth of the matter is that in Bedrock Edition, if you stand back at max reach distance and mine, you'll actually be mining faster than you do when you're right up close. So if you're going branch mining in Minecraft, you'll just want to take a couple steps back. At least until this bug gets patched. But with how long it's been on the bug tracker, I don't imagine that's going to be soon. Starting a farm is a slow process, and while bone meal might help you cut down on the growth cycle, it can still be a pain to break the crop and get a measly return. Though if we look over to Minecraft's loot tables, we might be able to tip the scales. You see, the way that the Fortune 3 enchantment works, we can even see the benefit when we break our carrots and potatoes. So, sure enough, the next time that you go to harvest, maybe bust out the Fortune 3 pickaxe instead of your fist. Just that simple change could net you an extra item for each crop planted, which, trust me, adds up. Back in Snapshot 21W05A, Mojang accidentally made a block that was stronger than Bedrock. Because if you were to use bone meal in a drip leaf plant that you planted underneath some Bedrock, then it was fully capable of destroying that block as well as plenty others, such as enchanting tables or beacons. Which is just great. It's strong enough to break those things, but it's not strong enough to hold a feather. But Minecraft's never made sense, even with features that stay in the game. Bedrock's bone meal isn't just broken for tall grass, but it's also broken for the flowers too. And here, all it takes to build yourself an AFK flower farm is just to hold down right-click with a whole bunch of bone meal on this flower, since here it'll only grow more of the flower that you wanted to grow, instead of a bunch of ugly grass and stuff mixing it up, which I'd say is pretty nice. But if you try this on 2 tall flowers, you're just gonna get more of those 2 tall flowers popping off. Using waterlogged leaves, we can see through walls, and here's how. If you're on Bedrock, first dig a canal of water, fill it up with leaves, and then go beside them and till the soil with a hoe. And by doing this, we get exactly 1 pixel of window to see through the world. And it would seem that the reason this works is because the game doesn't render blocks that the player can't see. And since the water inside is supposed to be invisible from all sides, it's not actually rendered. Though it doesn't recognize that we tilled the soil next to it, so we do get a sneak peek through the glitch like so. As user T-Pupper showed off on Reddit, back in the snapshot of 19W42A, there was a glitch where if you planted a tree on a dirt block, and then had another dirt block at any height above that tree sapling, then when you bone mealed the tree, it would grow on the block above instead. And folks, there was no limit to the amount of gap that we could have here, getting some really peculiar sights if you decided to plant your tree on the bottom level of the floor. You'd get that tree, but it would be up in the mountains. Now, if only you had some wood to make some ladders to reach the tree, then you'd be solved. Stop building your cobblestone generators like this, but rather build it like this. As you'll notice, by using a waterlogged stair instead of a water source block, we get a few benefits. Namely, you can't accidentally create obsidian, since the water doesn't flow out of the back of the stair. And even though this has been marked on the bug tracker, it's been open for years, so I'm not that worried about it getting patched soon, if at all. Ever wondered how much damage you deal to a mob? Well, surely some of you must, because there's so many mods out there that exist to show you a mob's health bar. But really, you can see this within the game as well, because when you attack a mob and they display the heart particles, if you actually took the time to count those, you notice that they're not just for show. They actually display the exact amount of damage that you dealt to the mob. Now granted, they show up pretty quick and they sometimes overlap, but sure enough, if you deal 5 hearts of damage, you're gonna see 5 hearts pop up above that mob's head, which is a pretty cool effect, but even knowing this, I doubt I'm ever gonna take the time to count it. I'll know how much damage I've dealt to a mob when they die. If it's not enough to kill them, then it's not enough for me. In the earlier versions for the Caves and Cliffs update, it was possible to use a damaged anvil to duplicate all of your items. All you had to do is fill up your inventory with filler blocks so that there's only one space left for the item you want to duplicate, and then continuously rename that item through the anvil until it eventually breaks, and then you'll find out that the item itself will be duplicated. And while you could do this with a single item, you're gonna get your better returns if you used a shulker box instead, since there you could have a potential of 27 times the items you're duplicating. And hey, shulker boxes weren't always renewable either, so this solved 2 problems at once. Or if your Mojang caused 2 problems, because it was never seen in later updates. Now, when you see a hostile mob spawn in a village, you're probably not paying much attention to your villagers. I mean, after all, you want to deal with the threat. However, if you take a close look, you can actually notice that when villagers are nervous, they'll begin sweating and emit water particles above their head, which I think is a really cute detail. If anything, it's just a smart way to reuse this particle effect in a different way. But it might be hard to get a villager stuck in one place long enough to see this, because also when villagers get scared of a zombie, they'll start running even faster than the player can at max speed. Yeah, they get a little scared and that's all the inspiration they need. It's never worked for me. I get scared in a chase scene, I'm lying down dead. I'd rather go out in peace. Instead of using boats, why not use dolphins? Crazy as it sounds, if you get a dolphin onto a lead, you can enjoy the dolphin's grace buff for however long your journey is. And to get even more out of this trick, try wearing some Death Strata 3 boots to give you that extra speed right across the 7 seas. Because with just those 2 things, we can start to travel over 36 blocks per second. Just like that, you travel 2 chunks every second that passes by. That's some serious speed. And very similar to when we were growing our trees in the wrong place, in the later snapshot of 20W21A, if you did that same trick as earlier with a larger tree, it would not only grow above, but it would also place the dirt underneath the tree when it generates, giving you a top shelf tree and some extra dirt to boot. You're just gonna have to look at this eyesore to get it. Here's how you're able to make infinitely wireless redstone using just an iron and a diamond pickaxe. Now, as this exploit is demonstrated by user Jerry Lum, you can see that what we have to do first is place down a cobblestone block here in front of the piston, and then start breaking it with our iron pickaxe. Then, once we've done that, we're going to push it out of the way using the piston, and instead place an obsidian in its place. And now, this gets a little weird, but you have to start breaking the obsidian with the iron pickaxe enough to see the block break animation. Once you do, switch over to a non-pickaxe slot in your hotbar, and at that point the game knows that the obsidian's supposed to break, but it won't actually break until we switch over to that diamond pickaxe. And folks, that's basically your recall button at this point. As long as you don't switch over to that diamond pickaxe, you're not going to trigger this obsidian. Now yes, because we're using obsidian to set this up, it will take a long time to set up too. I mean, 5-minute timer is going to be pretty rough. But being able to sync up one of these with your Ender Pearl stasis chamber means that anywhere in your world, we can basically press a button to teleport ourselves right back to the spot, which is really so cool. Or you could set it up with a nether portal as they do in this example, and turn it off when you're getting chased in a manhunt. I mean, as long as you have a block update detector like this, it's a fully wireless universal remote. And at that point, it's really just the limits of your imagination. Go wild. Seeing through walls would be a superpower that most of us would love to have. But Steve isn't exactly Superman, so the idea is a pipe dream. Or it would be if we stayed at this FOV. See, the way that field of vision works in Minecraft, if you drink a Speed 2 potion and then turn your slider up to Quake Pro, then you can get some really wide vision. And then, all it takes is lining yourself up next to a wall, and the job is done. So if you suspect that your friend might be hiding things around your base, this might be the perfect shot to find it. And it'll make Green's job of hiding his even tougher to do. Bubble elevators are a great tool to have in your world, because if you're looking for speed from one point to another, you'd be hard-pressed to find a better option than this, which makes them a staple in plenty of players' builds. And that's where this idea comes in. As you'll notice, ender pearls aren't the only thing that these things can keep in stasis. Other projectiles such as arrows work as well. So if you fire a bunch of instant damage arrows along the top and then keep that chunk loaded, then as soon as they come up to the top, they'll be met with quite the rude awakening, which takes their elevator to the top floor and turns it right into a stairway to heaven. Nowadays, we're used to getting Minecraft snapshots on Wednesdays, but in the past, Friday was actually more associated with updates. And that's because in the early days of Minecraft, the game's creator Notch would release secret updates on Fridays, calling it Secret Update Fridays. And some notable features that were added in this way were the minecart and rails, dungeons and spawners, redstone as an entire concept, boats, sugarcane, chickens, jukeboxes, spider jockeys, crouching, paintings, fishing rod. There was quite a bit that was in early alpha that came from this way. And I'll be honest, I kinda love the idea of doing this, but it was later discontinued for the Halloween update, since Notch would go on to tweet on October 7th of 2010 that they were postponed until they know what to do with them. And given the fact that there was nothing else that happened with these ever, I'd say that it's probably safe to say they don't know what to do with them. And really, the last thing that was ever said on the topic was, I liked the Friday updates, but Saturday fixes suck. And that much I have to agree with. Dragon's Breath is a tough item to get, and that's in no small part thanks to the fact that you need to fight a dragon to get it. But if you want some lingering potions and tipped arrows, then it's a necessity. So if you want to get your supply as quickly as possible, this might speed up the process. See, instead of filling our bottles from the magic on the floor, we could just take as much as we want from the dragon's head. And while it's a glitch, it is nice to have our stuff bottled at the source. Roller coasters are a great thing, but powering a minecart is not an easy or cheap task to fulfill. So instead of wasting hours away in the caves hunting for gold and redstone, why don't we find a cheaper motor up here on the surface? And for that, it might be time to fire up the villager breeder. Now, I've talked about the benefits of mixing boats and minecarts plenty of times, but we can actually take it up a notch by adding a villager to that very boat. At that point, the cart keeps moving along a great speed on that track, allowing you to hitch a ride without ever running up the cost to go with it. Honey blocks are clearly a useful tool. Whether you want to keep your villagers in place, mobs out of your base, or a flying machine through space, these do the trick just fine. But their sticky qualities can just as easily be turned to the dark side. You see, with the advent of lava cauldrons in 1.17, we can pair these two concepts together and make a particularly sinister trap. Since honey blocks make jumping so difficult, when we throw one of these under a lava cauldron, suddenly, the player's no longer able to escape. And with that, this seemingly harmless block becomes one that you gotta look out for. So if you're trying to feel like a Bond villain, this might just be your next interrogation technique. In a lot of ways, single player can be a much riskier operation than a server. At the very least, you've got no one else to blame if something goes wrong. So say you're playing by yourself late one night and happen to stumble into a nether river. Now, the situation does look pretty dire, but not unsalvageable. You see, one major exploit in the single player system is the ability to pause whenever you like. And that's where the saving grace comes in. By quitting and rejoining constantly, you can use the brief seconds of spawn protection each time to maneuver yourself out of the situation. Is it cheating? Sure, but hey, who said exploits have to be fair? When you think of space travel, you're probably picturing something like this, but it turns out a boat can work just as well. Let me explain. See, on Bedrock, if you were to put a boat on top of a pad of slime blocks, bounce on top of it a couple of times, and then get in, then we can ride that sucker sky high. And if you ask me, that's definitely the weirdest and the cheapest way to reach the stratosphere. So if you're tired of building the traditional elevator or ladder, then this will definitely offer some new leverage. Every time that you die in Minecraft, you're given a score, which seems kind of pointless considering that this isn't an arcade game, and the only scoreboard that's in the game is a command that's used to track other things. But what you'll notice is that that number is tied to the amount of experience that you have on death. And so if we were to die with over 21,863 levels, then the score that you get is actually negative. And the reason being is that we're going over the integer limit for this number. It doesn't know what to display, it gives us a negative, which is kind of funny. The game's basically calling you out for being a tryhard, which yeah, if you have 21,864 levels, you probably deserve a little bit of call out. But it is also funny to me that even with all those levels, if you went to go add all these things together in an anvil, it would still tell you it's too expensive. That's a rant for another day, but it still annoys me. If you've ever filled up the end portal, you're probably familiar with how this story goes. You place in the Eyes of Ender, brace yourself, and then jump in for the fight. Only this time, we're still standing on top, which is pretty weird, but it turns out that on Bedrock, it's possible to stand in the portal without teleporting. All we need to do is place a set of fences underneath like so, and we can essentially make it off limits. Or at least it's off limits until someone breaks that wooden fence, which is a small hurdle to cross. While Minecraft might not have the most accurate physics engine on the market, there is one thing that's true in-game and in real life. You can't walk through solid matter. Or can you? Now, surely you can't do it like this, but with the help of shulker boxes, the line gets a lot more blurry. Since these containers expand their hitboxes when you open them up, we can use that to push ourselves through solid walls. Place a face in this way, open it up, and find yourself squeezed out on the other end. And you can even use this for hidden floor entrances like such. Just leave a gap underneath and a block over top, and you'll disappear in a pretty sneaky fashion. Minecraft's fluid dynamics don't make a lot of sense, and nowhere is that more apparent than when it comes to farmland. See, the way it's coded is that water will hydrate any farmland with a 9x9 grid like so, but that works regardless of what block is in between them, meaning that your crops can hydrate even through thin air. And if you ask me, that's just absurd. But sure enough, it does work. So if you're looking to make a farm on your skyblock, I guess this is something to consider. But other than that, it just seems pointless. Throughout history, Minecraft has had its fair share of cannons. Whether you're caving holes with a TNT launcher or creating a nuisance with a sand cannon, there are plenty of different ways to launch projectiles in the game. And as it turns out, the 1.17 update offers up an even newer addition to that category. As I'm sure you know, these dripstone blocks are not to be messed with. But better still, deal is that we're able to launch these using slime blocks and pistons. Even with a small one like this, the momentum that we add in here could be just enough to make the option lethal. So while everyone else is worried about the differences between stalactites and stalagmites, you'll know that their best application truly is as bullets. Now, when you break glass with your fist, it's supposed to drop nothing. So why does this work? Well, that's because using chemicals, we were able to create hardened glass. And with this, it'll take longer to break than normal glass, but it'll drop itself when broken by any tool or hand. And folks, it isn't just us who has trouble breaking this glass, but the creepers have issues too. Since even though a regular glass block has a blast resistance of 0.3, when we use aluminum oxide and boron trioxide to make hardened glass, now it's got a blast resistance of 9, which just for perspective, makes that harder than any building block that isn't made out of obsidian. There's no feature too weird to sneak past Phoenix SC, and this is in fact one of those examples. Since while you would probably never take a look at the top half of the bed like this, and after all it doesn't place that way, and it very rarely spawns that way, and only if the world generation bugs out, then you could see that there's a hidden black dot that's tucked into the texture of every Minecraft bed. And while that alone is weird, what's even funnier is that if you were to look at this on the bug tracker when this is brought to light, Mojang's resolution is that they weren't even gonna fix it, which I've gotta say, cracks me up. It seems like it'd be an easy fix, but I think even they know it's so circumstantial that what's the point of spending any amount of time to go in and fix it? I guess they're just waiting for the next texture update and they'll go in and fix everything. It's not worth doing it right now. Though if they ever want to do a beds and heads update, I think this would be a fun one to tuck in. At the very least, just to put it to bed. Okay, now I'm done. If you were to mix up these ingredients inside of a lab table, we get ourselves the new bleach item, which if you were to combine in a crafting table with dyed carpet, wool, banners, or beds, you'll notice that it reverts all of them back to white. And before you ask, no, you can't drink it. And maybe it's just the internet that ruined me, but I was kind of surprised that you couldn't. As far as Minecraft minigames go, Spleef is a classic. And while it's perfectly functional to play this using a shovel or even eggs, what's really worth trying is using a crossbow. Though not to shoot the other players, but rather the drip leaf plants beneath them. See, when these are shot, they'll open up a gap into the floor. And moreover, we could add on enchantments like multi-shot and get ourselves a fun twist on the standard setup. And if you ask me, that's worth trying, even if it'll take some time to build the arena. Or if you'd like, you don't even need to use elements to craft at all. And instead, we could take after this user and build them in our world for these giant signs. Now granted, you're kind of limited to the colors that they are, but from afar, it definitely is eye-catching. And if you ask me, it starts to make your world look like the Breaking Bad intro credits, which it's up to you if that's a good or bad thing. Or if you don't even want to place these inside your world, you could just put them in a chest to write out messages that way, since unlike regular blocks, these sprites are actually flat when they're inside of your inventory. Parrots might seem like a cute mob, but they have a dark secret. And that secret is that, much like actual parrots, they're able to imitate different sounds. And unfortunately for you, if you were to keep a parrot as a pet, you might notice that they're able to imitate the sounds of hostile mobs. So that time that you heard a creeper when you were in the jungle and you couldn't find one around, that might have been the reason for it. But while that sounds like a downside, it actually could be an upside if you know what to look out for. Since by keeping a parrot on hand, then it'll start to imitate sounds of mobs that you might not have seen yet. So basically giving you an alert system for when there's hostiles nearby. Granted, the subtitles feature could also do this, but this is a lot cuter. So I'm inclined to use this if I can. If you're not prepared, the Wither can be a tough opponent, especially on harder difficulties. I mean, at the very least, with 300 HP to its name, taking one down isn't usually a speedy experience. Or so you thought. As it turns out, while we've been wasting our time using swords, tridents, and axes to slay the boss, there's actually a much stranger option for victory. By crafting yourself a chunk of these fully powered firework rockets, then that's all that you need to beat the beast in roughly 10 seconds. Though I should note that for safety, it's probably best to spawn it under a bedrock fountain like such, but after you do that, then you can just simply hold down the right-click button and get ready for the hard-earned Nether Star. Stratters don't like to be cold, and that raises an unfortunate problem for us, since if we want them to be happy, we need to incorporate some kind of fire hazard into our builds, and that's not ideal, to say the least. But go figure, moss carpet is the proper solution. Since this carpet doesn't burn, we can use it as a protective layer for our lava, and the Stratters will be happy and warm just the same, which I'll say makes it a lot less stressful to mount one of these, and gives us quite the pleasant compromise. Spawning into a new world should be a positive experience. After all, it's the start of something fresh and exciting, so that's gotta count for something. But in this case, it's more of a rude awakening than a clean start, since on this seed, we just so happen to spawn right on top of a cactus of all places. And I don't think I'm out of line by calling that a bad spawn. So if you want to start out your world with a depleted health bar and a bad attitude, I guess this does the trick, for whatever that's worth. On top of using our elements to craft, we can also use them to brew in a brewing stand, and that gives us these new items of medicine. Now, these are almost like anti-potions. They're capable of curing effects instead of giving them, and we got 4 different kinds to choose from. We've got an antidote that cures poison, an elixir that cures weakness, eye drops that'll cure your blindness, and then a tonic that'll cure your nausea. And to get all of those, you'll need to brew a different ingredient with an awkward potion. And luckily, to make sure you don't waste it, you can only drink the medicine if you have that corresponding effect. Though it does beg the question that you could get rid of all of these if you just drink milk. If you've ever visited the Creative Mode's Redstone tab, you're aware that Minecraft has a few buttons to choose from. But while you're likely picturing something like this, what if I told you that these pressure plates could be pressed the same way? Here's an example. See, if we were to take a firework rocket and right-click it to place it on the pressure plate, then the entity will temporarily give off a pulse. And as such, we can trigger these plates from afar. And while the practicality is questionable, I'm sure your redstone experts can find a proper use for it. This here is the camera, and what's unique about it is that it works as both an entity and an item in your inventory. And talking about the latter first, if you use it inside of your inventory, you can take a first-person screenshot as you expect. But when you place it on the ground, then it'll become an entity and start to take photos from the camera's perspective. And it even tracks the player while you're walking around for the perfect shot. And I know, it does look intimidating, considering that it plays the same detonation animation as the TNT, but don't worry, it's completely safe. And once it gets the perfect shot, you can look inside your new portfolio item and see the different photos that it takes, which, considering Bedrock doesn't have a screenshot functionality, I guess is the best we got. In case you didn't know, boats and Endermen can make a great combo. After all, what better way to take down an enemy that teleports all the time than by having it not teleport at all? It's a no-brainer if you ask me. But while these are clearly useful for trapping these foes, there's actually more that these ships can do. After setting yourself up with a 2-block tall ceiling, whether in the end or a warped forest, then all you need is just a couple of boats by your feet and the farm's ready. No joke, from there, anytime that you anger an Enderman with a passing glance, it'll come close and get stuck in the boat. And folks, then the job is done. Bridges are a staple in Minecraft building, but while we usually build these out of blocks, or maybe campfires, I doubt arrows are your first pick. Though as this user shows off, that might be our mistake. Sure enough, in certain versions, it's possible to hit yourself with a punch 2 arrow as it's falling to score some extra knockback. And while we'll lose some height in the process, this does work well enough to cross a gap that's dozens of blocks wide. And if you're ever being chased by someone in a manhunt, that might be all the space you need. Keeping your items safe and tucked away is a complex problem. And while an ender chest is often the solution, this doesn't seem too shabby either. As it turns out, this seed generated a buried treasure chest in such a way that it's encased in a thing of bedrock around all sides. And not only does this generate bedrock in a way that it's not supposed to, but it also gives a pretty solid defense to your valuables. That is, if you could even get inside. And honestly, for the amount of effort it takes to break in, you'd wish that the treasure inside was more worthwhile. Even though Minecraft is a sandbox game, there are certain rules we're not supposed to break, like placing blocks above a certain height. I mean, why else would it be called the build limit? But that doesn't explain why this site works like so. See, by using a method the community's found for mixing falling sand entities with invisible shulkers, we can essentially make our own builds both above and below the world limit, which can result in some pretty wild sights for sure. So if you're looking for a project in creative, it's a fun tool to use. Elytras are a great asset to have, but having to beat the dragon before you get one could be something of a hassle. So if you found the end portal and want to jump to the good stuff, all you need is a piston to make it work. As Mysticat shows, pushing yourself with a piston underneath the portal is enough to teleport us to the relative coordinates in the end. So if you got a slow falling potion and a handful of ender pearls, we can quite literally find the end city loop before even attempting the dragon fight. And with that, folks, YouTube thinks that you might like this video, so see if they're right and have a good one, alright?